Graham, how are you?
I'm all right, Pete. Thanks very much for asking. How are you?
Really good, thank you. It's a pleasure to have you on my Safety Tech podcast.
Well, it's nice to be on. It's nice to be on your podcast. I appreciate the invitation. So,
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. So, look, before we start, would you mind giving us a bit of an introduction, a little bit about your background for everyone listening?
yeah, sure. My background is operations. I've been in operations probably the majority of my life. I'm a business owner. So, since 2008, I've worked and managed my own businesses, about three or four different businesses in the consultancy and tech space. And the latest iteration is our healthcare technology business, which is altushealthcare.co.uk if anyone wants to look it up. And we are offering fall prevention, activity management, IT services, Wi-Fi network, and a host of other tech to the care sector in the UK.
Amazing. How did you get into that?
So it's a bit of a long story, basically, but I've been in tech since 2008. In 2014, I think it was, me and a few friends set up a software business which we listed on the ASX. Um, and a spin out from that was an IoT business, a device business, Internet of Things business. And then after that business, the market wasn't really ready for IoT, still isn't, in my opinion. But as a spin out from that, I set up Altus Digital Services, Altus AV, which is a commercial and residential um, home automation business. And then a couple of years ago, my parents, who were in a care home, they had a fall, and my mum uh, broke her leg, lost mobility, had difficulties breathing, and then eventually passed. My dad fell and was down for 2 hours, probably more than 2 hours. Actually, nobody in the care group knows exactly what happened, how it happened, how long they were on the floor for. He was down for longer than 2 hours, and as a result of that, he also passed away. So at the time, I remember saying to my engineers, go and get me every bit of fall detection prevention kit on the market. Let's take a look at it. It was all pretty useless, to be fair. Didn't really do anything, didn't really offer any insight. The only thing that was available at the time, which is pretty much all anyone uses now, is a nurse call system, which means it's a red cord hangs from the ceiling. If you don't fall near that call, you can't call anyone, right? So it's pretty useless as a technology. So a few years ago, I bumped into a company called Nobi. They've got some really ingenious fall prevention technology, and we took that on as an installer in the UK. And now we're now installing that into 100 care homes in the south of England.
But first of all, Graham, I'm really sorry to hear about the loss, and your story resonates with a lot of the other conversations that I have with companies and people that come on this podcast, in that they've got into the field that they're in for very personal, like very sort of emotional drivers, like very moral drivers. I think within the safety world, there's this vision that people have got into the technology that they've got into in order to make money. And, obviously that's part of it. But what I've actually found is a lot of people have got into trying to improve safety through technology because of very real, very personal experiences that have happened to them. And that's what's motivated them to say, do you know what? I can bring my skills and expertise from another industry and my background. I can apply them to this safety related industry and I can make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the technology that we offer is available to everybody, but what we actually are looking for are clients that want to make a difference. So, we want to make a difference. We've got a mission. So our business is a mission. It's not a business. Our business mission is to basically, have this technology in every care home in the UK, 440,000 of them. And that will save lives. It will save lives of people's parents. It will save people like me going through the trauma that, myself and my siblings went through. Um, and on the flip side of that, it'll save the NHS about 1.4 billion a year through hospital admissions, which That's probably not to be sniffed at, is it?
It's a huge numbers, aren't they? And this is one of the things that I have conversations with people a lot is about the scalability of problems. I worked for the NHS before, and just the tiniest little decisions can make such a difference because of how big that organization is.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're
No,
scaled on a massive scale.
yeah, no, it's interesting. We were talking to one ICB integrated care board, and they've actually emailed me this morning to say that there is no funding available to promote fall prevention in their region, which to me is unbelievable. What I read into that is we're quite happy to take elderly people into hospitals with fractures, hips, shoulders, which will eventually lead to their death within 6 months, rather than spend a small amount of money promoting technology out to care groups in our region. It's inconceivable to not have funding to prevent, but put funding into trying to cure. For me, having spent many, many years in operations and in consultancy, not dealing with prevention, but funding cure or not cure as it is, it just makes no sense to me at all.
So let's carry on with that theme then. Why do you think that is?
Do you know what? I'm not exactly sure. I think a lot of the care companies, they look at the bottom line, obviously. And there are a lot of care companies out there who are very, very resident and person-centered focused. And they're to be commended. So the companies we're working with who are adopting technology in the right way, they're really the ones that you have to kind of take your hat off to. They're not only committing to the technology, they're also committing to the behavior change that is needed to adopt that technology as well. I think the NHS, certain integrated care boards, they've tried some technologies, not really fully understood it because they're clinicians, excellent at caring, but their job is not technology. So there's a few ICBs that have tried technology, it hasn't worked for them, they've kind of walked away from it. And there's others that think they need funding to promote technology, therefore they're not willing to put the effort in to do it. And yet other ICBs fully understand it, are fully behind it, understand and have supported us in developing data to show the savings to the NHS through prevention. But again, region to region, it's highly variable. So it does all come down to the people and their willingness to want to prevent rather than cure.
When we take a theme like data, right, and this is something that I talk about a lot in safety, I feel like in safety we're really bad at data. Right? We're really poor at data. And I feel like in data there's a couple of elements that we're trying to look at. And one is the actual reduction of harm and how we quantify the reduction of harm.
Mm-hmm.
And the other is the data around the financials, like actually how we put a financial benefit to the investment. So what I said, like an ROI, right? What's the ROI on the investment? How do you approach those two things?
I think if we tackle just falls, it's very easy. So in fact, the Office for National Statistics produce detailed numbers on admission rates, reasons for admissions, cost of admissions. So last year there were approximately 288,000 falls of people aged over 65 in care homes in the UK, which resulted in a hospital admission. Hospital admission costs are roughly £5,000. So you take 288,000, you multiply it by 5,000. That's where you get your big numbers from, right?
Yeah.
And then it's a simple case of looking at the impactability. So how many of those can be prevented? Right. I think what people who deal with data in healthcare are not particularly good at is they treat those numbers in isolation. So this many people fell. This is how many people were admitted. What they don't look at is how long they were in for, right? And how many times they came back. So our data would suggest that those who are admitted as a result of a fall, have a fracture, um, they will have a complication, whether that be breathing, movement, another fracture. They will come back between 5 and 10 times into hospital. So that's actually 5 times £5,000, right? So we're asking for, let's say we're asking for £1,000 per room or per resident for fall prevention, and from an NHS perspective, they're going to save £25,000. It's not a bad return on investment, is it?
No, and I think I completely agree with what you're saying, is that those numbers are hugely conservative when we look at the after effects. And I mean, I don't know what the average cost of a hospital bed is overnight, but I seem to recall it's incredibly expensive, like pushing towards five figures. But I'm again making that off the top of my
So we've got
memory
some
somewhere.
data, which again is aggregated data across the UK, which would indicate that the length of duration first stay in hospital with delayed discharge to care is around 13 days at a cost of 65,000.
And that's a phenomenal cost to the taxpayer, right? It's a massive cost to the taxpayer.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two sides to this. One is you have to prevent them going into hospital in the first place, which is where our technology works. It prevents people going into hospital. Yeah, on the flip side, that delayed transfer to care, those numbers are staggering numbers, absolutely massive. And actually, if you can discharge someone earlier safely using technology to monitor vitals when they're at home, then actually you can save a majority of that cost as well. So the return on investment for technology, if people actually sat down and worked the numbers through correctly, it's inconceivable the amount of money that we could save as a nation on healthcare, whilst also improving care by preventing people going into hospital and improving the well-being of those in hospital by placing them back into their own homes safely. So it's crazy.
It's amazing when you look at, again, we're touching on an area in terms of the NHS that I haven't looked at for many years. So if I get this wrong, by the way, for anyone listening, then I apologize. But when you look at hospitals and you look at delays to admissions in hospitals, a lot of that is caused by what they call bed blocking, where they can't actually get the person out of hospital, even though they're well enough to leave, because they either haven't got the places back in community. So it's almost like there's this cascade once someone's gone into hospital, which includes not being able to get them back out again. So anything that you can do to prevent that in the first place, I think I agree with you wholeheartedly. This £5,000 is just the tip of the iceberg, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. And some of the numbers are just, crazy. So I've got some data here. In 2018, there were around 220,000 emergency hospital admissions related to falls amongst patients aged 65 or over. And 66% of those patients were aged over 80. Average stay in hospital because of delayed transfer to care was 13 days, and readmission to hospital as a result was 3 to 8 times, depending upon the additional complications that they had.
That's a staggering problem, isn't it? It's a staggering issue when you think about it. And you sort of, no, isn't it half of all our tax goes into the NHS or something? Isn't it like 50p out of every pound that we spend on tax goes into the NHS?
It does. And what's interesting is I spent a long time in consultancy for my sins, and if you can work a business case through like we've just done at a very high level, then that's great. If you can prove it, which we have, that's also good. But longitudinally, you need adoption. So you don't need just one ICB to adopt. You need all of the integrated care boards to adopt. And you need to study the effects longitudinally to make sure that the savings are actually being realized. And if they're not, you need to take action to address it to make sure that you are going to realize those savings. And that also seems to be something that clinicians don't seem to be great at, right? So longitudinal studies are relatively easy to do. 12 to 24 month studies are relatively easy to do, and there just doesn't seem to be an appetite to adopt and start, and even those that have adopted and started, secondly, continue to do that work. So we're working currently with Sussex ICB, and they've actually commissioned Brighton University to do that work. So they are well ahead of the curve in terms of their thought processes. They're well ahead of the curve in terms of their technology adoption. They've got one of the highest technology adoption rates in the UK. They've been the first to achieve their digital social care record adoption targets. They're now strongly advocating and pushing for fall prevention. And they've also commissioned a university to pull those numbers together to prove the longitudinal, the long-term benefits of technology adoption in healthcare as well. Now, if we could get more ICBs engaged in a similar thought process and taking a similar approach, rather than saying we don't have funding to promote technology, then yeah, I think we would be saving a lot of taxpayers' money in the healthcare system.
What do other countries do? You must have looked at this globally to see what other countries do in terms of elderly care.
Yeah, it's interesting. So when I had the IoT business, I spent a fair bit of time over in Singapore, and the health system over there is amazing. So every patient record is digital. Every aspect of a person's health is digital. New builds have the latest technology for the elderly installed, fall prevention, good fall prevention, not pull codes. Yeah, so there are a lot of exceptional healthcare practices in other countries that we don't have here.
I was going to ask you something else about this now, but I've forgotten what I was going to ask you.
No problem.
It's always the way, isn't it? I'm sitting here writing notes in front of me, and then all of a
Yes.
sudden you sort of move on to another topic, and then go, "Hang on, I was going to ask something about that before I move on." Okay, let's talk about the actual solution that you've got then in terms of the tech. How does it work?
Okay, so it's a suite of technology that we've integrated together. So it covers fall prevention. So the thing about prevention versus detection, we've just spoke about prevent rather than cure. 99% of the technology on the market is detection, right? So knowing myself what happened to my parents, detection is useless, right? Because there's an inevitable outcome to detecting a fall, which is they've fallen, right? So someone who falls, right, and has a serious fracture is dead within 12 months because of loss of mobility and health complications. Somebody who falls and is on the ground for longer than an hour, 50% of those will be dead within 6 months. So prevention, the ability to get to somebody in advance of a fall, that's key. So the technology we have, when it detects somebody beginning to wake, rise, come out of bed, because 67% of falls happen from a bed, 76% of falls happen of an evening. So the ability to detect when someone is leaving a bed or beginning to stay in bed so you can get to them, that's one of the key areas of preventing a fall. Okay. So the technology that we have allows carers to be able to do that. The other 30% of falls that occur during the day, 50% of those are due to the fact that the patient has been, or the resident has been disturbed in the evening, the previous evening. So in care homes, they have 2-hourly checks where they go in and shine a torch in the person's face or in the room, which just wakes the residents up, it's insane, but it's like the normal practice in the UK to do that. So because they've been disturbed and they can't get back to sleep, then they're fatigued the next day, and as a result of that, they trip or they lose their balance and then they fall. So actually having prevention technology that monitors a resident of an evening so that you don't need to go in and disturb them, that's preventing falls during the day. The fact it gives you an early warning alert when someone is staring so that you can go to the room and attend to them if needed, then that's preventing the other 76%. So yeah, the ability to prevent falls is, you know, that's what we need to do really.
And the technology, is it like a wearable? I don't think it is, but I just want you to explain, what
No,
it
it's
actually
it's
is and how it's installed.
no, it's an excellent question. So the thing is, with elderly residents, those that are on blood thinners or anticoagulants, they tend to have very frail skin.
Yes.
So wearables, again, they don't really work because they tear the skin. Right? Even round the neck, wearable pendant will tear the skin. And also those living with dementia, they will just take wearables off. They they just won't wear them. So this technology is a light, which is a pendant light, which hangs from the ceiling, and it monitors the residents' behavior. So it learns the behavior, how they move, how they sleep. It knows when they go to bed, what time they get up. It monitors their behavior overnight, so it knows if they've had to stay at night sleep or not. And in the event of a fall, it will give an early warning indication of a fall, so you can respond. But it will also capture images, still images, not CCTV, but still images of that fall, so that you can use that for your root cause work. So we spoke about prevention. So even in the instance where there is a fall, the ability to do root cause, to understand what happened and then take actions to prevent it from happening again, that's really critical as well.
That's interesting. And then the tech itself, it doesn't work on like CCTV or anything that's going to intrude on someone's privacy, does it? How does that work?
Yeah, so obviously we have to be mindful of a person's privacy and GDPR. So what it does is when it's monitoring for a fall, when it captures any images, it doesn't take any images at all if the resident is just moving around or asleep. But if it begins to detect a fall happening, it captures images, but it converts the image of the person into a stick figure. So it's completely anonymized. You cannot see the residents at all. So it's fully GDPR compliant. So it gives you a 13-point stick figure, which gives you the outline of the person. So you can detect if they're lying at an uncomfortable angle, or if they've hit furniture on the way down. Then you can look at all of that and analyze it. And in being able to do that as well, if you don't see a fall happen, the safest thing to do is just call an ambulance, because you just don't know what's happened. But this allows you to analyze the fall and see if they have hit something on the way down, like a piece of furniture, or if they've fallen awkwardly or potentially are lying at a funny angle. And about 30% of ambulance call outs being prevented because you can do that analysis work. And that will save significant sums of money as well.
Okay, so literally it will convert an image into a stick figure, 13 points, so like ankles, knees, hips, elbows, shoulders, head, neck, and then you can literally look at that and do the analysis. So it's not just reactive in terms of someone's fallen, therefore we do this. This really is getting into the proactive now, because this will be, to be honest, one of the first times that we can do some massive data analysis and look at how these falls are actually happening.
Yeah, and the thing about technology adoption in any sector, and you'll have seen it, of course, because you work across multiple sectors, is the tech is great, right? It's the people that work with the tech. That's the important thing. So, we must never forget that we have dedicated people who are committed to caring for their residents, and it's their engagement that's critical to doing the prevention work. So, can you imagine saying to someone who's never done any process work, any root cause analysis work, this is what we're going to do now, right? So you're going to care, but you're also going to be an expert at looking at processes, root cause analysis. So we spend a lot of time. So we don't just sell tech and say, there you go, there's a full prevention lamp. This is what it does. We have a whole system, which is, before we make sure we have the engagement of the executive team, we understand the baseline of falls at the home. We understand the carers and how resistant they are to technology, how good they are at technology adoption. So are they using tech at the moment, and what kind of tech they're using? Then we go through a whole piece around consent because of GDPR. We need to make sure we have consent. So we train the staff on consent and GDPR. We make sure consent is given by the residents, their families, or their carers. We train the electricians as well on how to install properly to standard. We make sure the electricians are NIC, EIC certified. Then we'll do some installations.
Yep.
So we have a whole piece before, just a change readiness, change management piece before, to fully engage everybody to make sure that post-installation, we're going to get the outcomes that we want. The outcomes that we're seeing with our clients are 50 to 80% reduction in falls, which is huge. In certain regions in the UK, in terms of reduction in ambulance call-out, that's being quantified by the ICB at £1.8 million. So the savings are significant. So that's up to installation. Post installation, we spend 4 to 6 weeks with the care home going through the data. So what is the data telling us? So this was your baseline data. It's really interesting because actually what we often find is there's no written definition of a fall.
Yep.
So we'll often help them to define what a fall is. We'll take the baseline data, and what we see is that occasionally the number of falls will increase. It's not because more people are falling more often. It's because we're categorizing and quantifying the falls correctly. So we see an increase. Then when they start to use the technology, we'll see that number pull down again. And that's what we're looking for. So on average in the UK, per care home, average falls, depending upon the type of care offered and the mix of comorbidity and other factors, between 20 and 40 falls per care home per month. Then what we'll see is that that's often reduced down to less than 5 once we are through with this process. So it's a 75% reduction in falls, which is huge.
75% reduction. So this is not just early intervention when someone does fall, it's actually 75% reduction in falls from ever occurring in the first place.
Yeah, so the important piece about the root cause work is to really understand why it's happened. And we've seen some absolutely fascinating, just think, until you actually do the work, you would never even think it would be a cause. So what we found is that especially gents in care, when they go to the toilet, they'll drop their pants completely to have a. When they bend over to get their trousers, they will tip over because they lose their balance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So even something as simple as knowing that, then you can have the conversation with the family about, shall we get some elasticated trousers? Because then they can pull the trousers down over their thighs, they stay there. And then when the gent is finished, he can just reach for them and pull them back up.
No, it's so simple, isn't it, when you think about it? And, there was this other thing that was just floating around in my brain about when you get up to go to the toilet, when someone shines a torch in your eyes in the middle of the night to check if you're all right to do the 2-hour check. Do you know what I mean? And I wonder if anyone's ever looked at the data of that we'll shine a torch in, then they've woken up and gone to the loo, and that's when they've had the fall because they're disorientated, they've woken up, it's dark. I don't know.
What's interesting about the technology, you can see how many times they've stared in the night and for how long. So often if there's a medication change, and another good early warning indicator is if they've got a urinary tract infection, you'll begin to see a trend in this data night after night after night where the frequency and duration of being out of bed increases. And that's an early warning indicator because obviously the more you're out of bed, the higher the risk and the probability of a fall. Yes. So it's just like doing an FMEA really, likelihood, occurrence and severity. If you can reduce those factors by early intervention, then you're going to improve the outcome.
So you must have like a massive database now of falls in terms of like these stickmen outputs. Do you ever do any analysis of those yourself en masse and ever put out the information as to, what I guess what I'm trying to say is like what the top 5 fall causal factors are within care homes. Is that something that you've looked at, or do you not actually have access to that database of falls?
Yeah, no, so we're still compiling the data, but we know hypotension is massive. So when somebody gets out of bed, they'll have a decrease in blood pressure,
Yep.
and that will result in a fall. And what's really interesting with that is a lot of the fall detection equipment out there, you have to fall as if you've been shot by a sniper. You're gonna have a proper like fall.
Yep.
Uh, with our technology, it will detect lots of different types of falls. So somebody who has hypotension, they will generally fall very slowly, but they'll get lightheaded. Their gait might change. They'll reach out to grab a piece of furniture. Then they'll begin to, go to their knees, and then they might end up on the floor. And that can take up to 3 minutes from leaving the bed. So if you see that happen and you know that they're prone to that happening, then obviously the minute they begin to move and get out of bed, you want to have a carer there, to help them. But similarly, if it is 3 minutes, then you've got a couple of minutes as well. So, but it really is about patient-centered care, right? It's about really understanding per resident what is the unique need of that resident, and how do you develop a care plan for each resident that will prevent those falls from happening. And you can't do that if you don't have any early warning indicators of a fall, any ability to analyze a fall, and any process like the management system we wrap around our installations to analyze and preventive measures in place for those residents. So it really is about the whole management system that's wrapped around the technology that allows you to do this work. And that's bringing a lot of background from consultancy across into the technology space to make sure there's a good change management program around the installation of the hardware. So we have rejected multiple clients in the UK because on that initial assessment about change readiness, they weren't ready. They had budget, right? They had budget. They could have afforded it, absolutely, but they wouldn't have got the outcomes that we want and those residents' families want because they weren't change ready. That's as important as installing the hardware, which is you want to make sure when you do install it, the organization is going to adopt it, use it, and drive a reduction in falls. Because if you drive a reduction in falls, you increase the longevity, the well-being, the health and happiness of the residents and the families, and that's ultimately what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and do you know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of Part L of building regs, where to get some commercial builds through, the build had to pass this Part L test, so it had to have a number of sort of environmental focused systems installed. So these would be things like rainwater harvesting, biomass boilers, and then you'd have a staff member running those on like a building management system that was really complicated, and the staff member, and I mean this with the utmost respect and love to those staff members, but it wasn't their bag, so they didn't do it. So those systems got shut down very quickly and decommissioned. So we'd build these buildings in this environmentally friendly way, and then the environmentally friendly aspect probably actually had more impact because someone's had to manufacture them, produce them, install them, and they were never used because it fell down at the start. So have you found through this change management process that have you got like any specific sort of things that you've found that can really help to bring staff along on the journey?
Yeah, I think being, I know this is going to sound really strange, but being present for them, because adopting technology is terrifying, So last week I was down at a care home in, can't remember exactly where it was, but it was near Beachy Head. I know that because I actually went to Beachy Head. It was lovely. But before I went down just because the care home manager was terrified of technology. And when I phoned her up initially, she said, I don't want it. I'm not interested. Don't even bring it here. I don't want it. I don't want it. And so I spent about half an hour on the phone just really trying to understand, well, what was that resistance? It would have been easy to say, okay, fair enough, but I just wanted to really understand what it was. And what it was the fact that she didn't have the confidence to sit down with her team and explain, this is what it is, this is how it works. So I spent about half an hour on the phone understanding that. Then I drove down all the way down there from Liverpool to near Beachy Head to sit down with her and the team and just get all of their fears and resistance and all of their concerns out. There was some around privacy, which obviously we discussed and we managed to kind of take care of that. And there was some just around technology adoption. Well, I've got a handset. How's it going to work on this handset? Well, it's going to work like this. And well, what happens if this happens? What happens? So we went through a lot of scenarios. So I spent about 2.5 hours there just talking to them, just trying to understand, what was there, and then reassuring them that if they did adopt the technology, we've got 24/7 support. So if they ever needed somebody, we're just on the end of the phone. One of the guys will pick up the phone and talk them through it and help them. Right? Post installation, we're there for 4 to 6 weeks to make sure that we're helping them track the data, do the root cause work, report it correctly into their record system. So yeah, just hold their hand all the way through. And I think a large part of change management is just that. No doesn't necessarily mean no. Our role is to really understand why and just see how much support is needed to do it. And they're now moving forward, which is fantastic.
Domestic applications for this, or is it purely commercial?
No, I mean there are domestic applications. I mean, one of the reasons we adopted this technology or other technologies is it's like an Amazon Alexa for fall prevention, basically. So, an electrician can install in 20 minutes, and you can be trained on how to use it over the phone in 20 minutes. So it could be used. It could be used in a kind of a B2C in a residential environment, should somebody want to do it, and it can be bought capital purchase, or it can be bought on a lease purchase. Right now, we are trying to get this adopted into our kind of a mission is to get this into care homes.
Yeah, because it's going to have the greatest impact, isn't it, in terms of the numbers?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, that would be the thing, would be for the ICBs to really understand the financial implications of not doing this, right? So everybody looks at it and goes, oh, well, that's the cost of doing it. And then you say to them, yeah, but what's the cost of not doing it? Cost of not doing it is 25 times the cost of doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The cost of not doing it is having all of these hospital beds blocked because you've got somebody in there who shouldn't be in there or who should be discharged to care. The cost of not doing it is when those beds are blocked, all of these people who are suffering from, cancer, brain tumors, they can't get into hospital because there's nowhere to put them post-operation.
Yep.
They're all the costs of not doing it. So should we just do it?
I mean, honestly, I really love this conversation. I think one of the important things for me is that you're looking at it from a financial aspect as well. I mean, look, of course, there's such a huge, strong moral argument to this. Like, we know it. And same as we know in safety all the time, it's one of the things I talk about, right? We know there's a legal argument for safety. We all know there's the Health and Safety at Work Act and all of the other regulations. We know that there's a strong moral argument for safety. We leverage that all the time as safety professionals. Like, you can't be killing your staff. You can't be hurting your staff. One of the things I always feel that we're very bad at in safety is making a strong financial argument for safety, not just over what stuff costs, but actually calculating an ROI of implementing a safety initiative. So what's the ROI of this safety investment? And having sat in board meetings many times when I ask for funding, I always feel that I lose half the board by not making a strong financial argument, right? Because I'm not talking the same language as the CFO or the FD or, the numbers people. And so I'm really impressed that you've got all of these numbers, right? The statistics are phenomenal and they're very hard to argue. Like I could get, come along with you on the emotional, the moral journey of this every day of the week, right? It really matters. These are people. But I really think you're going to have so much more weight with the financial numbers as well. That's something that I'm really impressed at. And it's something that I think it's a lesson that we need to take in safety back. I wonder if that's because of your business background, if you've.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I've actually been on the other side of the table,
Yeah, I bet
being
you
the
have, yeah.
CFO or this, and having people present things back to me. But yeah, I think with health and safety, and certainly with environmental and a few of the other kind of British standards, there will always be some quantitative savings, but there will also be qualitative cost avoidance. And the cost avoidance, that's where people have a get out of jail free card, right? Because they can say, yeah, but that cost may never happen.
Yeah.
Then you look at Grenfell and say, well, actually, it did. So, what's the likelihood? What's the probability? What's the severity? And what is the outcome? And we can throw numbers at the NHS all day, their own numbers. These are your numbers. These are your numbers. These are your numbers. But ultimately, it boils down to this: what's the cost of a life? What's the cost of my parents' lives? If this technology would have been available, maybe it wouldn't have saved their lives, but maybe it would have prevented one of them from going as soon as they did, right?
Yep.
The cost of a life emotionally for relatives, yeah, you just can't put a figure on it, can you?
100%. I'd love to talk to you about IoT, Graham, but before we move on to IoT, is there anything else that we need to know about this technology?
No, all I would say, if anyone is listening to this, I know some care providers do listen to this. All I would say to them is, don't just look at the technology in isolation. Look at the engagements of staff. Look at the use of management information and the translation of the data into the bottom line. Because actually, we did some work for a group lately, very, very proactive group, based in the Northwest and the Midlands. Hugely innovative, just fantastic people to work with. I wish all care providers were like this. And what the numbers that we've ran for them indicate that by using this technology with other technology that we have, with a 33% efficiency gain for staff, every fourth care home they build, they're effectively staffing it for free. Now, in a sector where care homes are crying out for staff that they cannot get, right? They cannot get them. The opportunity to continue to grow and staff a home for free because you've saved money on these 3 homes over here, surely that is a compelling argument as well. So don't just look at the tech. Don't compare the functionality of the tech. Take a look at the business as a whole and what the tech and an approach like ours can do for the business as a whole, and make that your technology transformation program.
100%. IoT. See,
Okay.
we've had a conversation about this before, and you did IoT before IoT was a thing. I mean, such a long time ago now, and you still think it's too soon for IoT. Can you explain?
Yeah, so I think one of my, I worked in the built environment. I used to run manufacturing plants, and then after that, I worked in in the built environment on CAFM systems and other things as well. And I understand the built environment reasonably well. Maybe not to your standard, but reasonably well. One of the things that always upset me was SFG. G20 as a standard never made any sense to me at all. I used to say to people, SFG20 is like taking someone to a doctor to treat them for a heart attack before they've had it, or even knowing what the condition of the heart was, right? You could be taking an athlete, or you could be taking a 20 stone obese person, right? SFG20 made no sense. So again, similar to the conversation we've just had about the fall prevention, what we were trying to do was we were trying to take the data from IoT and turn it into predictive analytics that would modify SFG20. And we did a lot of work with a company, NG. Was it NG? Yeah, we did a lot of work with NG. on this, taking their data from IoT, right? So we installed IoT devices across a lot of their high cost SFG20 items, pumps, fan coil units, etc., feeding that data into a predictive tool and saying, if we were willing to accept a little bit more risk, what would that do to the frequency and the cost of intervention? So a modeling tool that we built using Python at the time. I had a guy working on it. It was a bit of a Raid Man genius, but yeah, we built this modeling tool, and the cost savings were phenomenal. And the thing is, the cost savings were phenomenal without significantly increasing risk. So I'm not saying you would do this in a laminar flow air handling system in an operating theater, right? I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, you go into any, all of the the buildings by 2030, 99.9%, and they're built now, aren't they? So, you take pumps, fan coil units, air handling units, even lighting systems, and you look at the probability of failure, or not even failure, but the probability of risk if you extend the maintenance period from, every 6 months to every 7 months, or maybe not even doing that consistently, but maybe, for a year every 7 months, and then the next year every 6 months. And the cost savings are phenomenal. And you know what? The risk profile doesn't change. It depends on the age of the unit, right? So when you get a new bit of hardware and you start to run it, there's risk there. It's like an airplane taking off and landing. Once it's in the air, it's fine, isn't it? So
Yep.
you start a pump or an air handling unit or something. In that startup phase, there's risk. In the shutdown phase, there's risk. But generally, when it's running, it's okay. And yet, just being able to analyze properly data, look at data and analyze it, that's where IoT could be massive, with a suitable platform that gives you an outcome you can use and translate into a business case. IoT is not ready because too many technologies with too many transmission protocols with no interoperability around them at too high a cost, and no back end which is universal to provide data analysis and decision making that will translate into a financial outcome. That's why IoT is still not ready.
It's like you worked really hard on a strap line not to sell that business. That's the best strap line I've ever heard. It's actually the antithesis of your company vision.
So if you what people need now, people are so time pinched now, right? They just need a big thing in front of them that says, do this.
Yep.
Right. I mean, that's what we like about the technology that we have now in the healthcare business, because it literally just says, do this now, yeah, or do this tomorrow, but do it. And if you don't do it, we'll know you haven't done it and we'll flag it, right?
Yep.
But with IoT, that does not exist. It's not there. And until it is there, and it's noddy simple to use and cost effective, it will never be a viable technology. So all of this kind of smart buildings and IoT of the future and all that, having been in that sector for many years, it's not for me.
There's so many things to unpack here. FG20, it's a private company, so don't sue me. I'm not gonna, if they're listening. It's your business, it's your thing. But yeah, there are a lot of discrepancies in SFG20. I've worked with it before, and when an FM company says to me, "Oh, we follow SFG20," it's like, okay, that's cool. Let's talk about fire doors. SFG20 will say you maintain a fire door every 6 months, for example, or undertake an inspection every 6 months. Whereas we know there's a ton of conflicting guidance on that. Maybe 6 pieces I could name now that will recommend everything from a risk-based inspection frequency, which goes down as far as daily, up to annual. It's and everything in between, depending on the use of the building. So SFG is full of inconsistencies if you look hard enough for them. I completely agree with you in terms of moving to it's weird, isn't it? Because you say proactive maintenance, but it's actually not. It's reactive maintenance. In IoT, you'd almost move to a reactive maintenance schedule in terms of you maintain when something starts to go wrong, rather than
No,
proactively maintain.
I think it's not. I think it's not reactive, and I don't think it's proactive. I think it's predictive. If you have
Predictive
a decent
maintenance.
model, yeah, I
Nice, I
mean,
like it.
yes, the thing about machine learning now, artificial intelligence doesn't exist, but the thing about machine learning now is that if you have enough data points, right? So if you had enough SKF pumps, as an example,
Yep.
under management, right, and you had 10,000 data points a month flowing into a machine learning profile, it would tell you predictively what that maintenance routine should be. And I know that because we built that program manually ourselves in Python, and it was 100% accurate over the duration we used it,
Yep.
which was 12 months.
Do you think there's too many stakeholders involved, though? You've got the manufacturers. So say like you have a pump, right? That they will come with the manufacturer's instructions, their recommendations on their maintenance schedule, and their guarantees if you maintain it to that standard. You've also again got the hard FM provider, like you mentioned on before. They're going to want to work to a frequency, a schedule, because they're going to want to set out all their PPMs so they know that they've got the staff available to do it. And if you start to change that, it starts to muck up their systems in the back end, and they're like, well, it's harder to I'm going to say predict, but it's harder to plan out an annual maintenance schedule for a building that's new because we don't have enough data yet in order to do it. Then it's harder to maintain SLAs, to maintain contracts, or to achieve contracts. Where does it come from to get this push? Because once again, with IoT and this predictive maintenance, it makes absolute perfect sense, right? But there's got to be blockers somewhere. Like, where is the challenge in this process that you see?
So I found when I was working in that sector is the person who's ultimately accountable will be the CFO of the end client, because they're the ones who are going to pay the bill, right?
Yep.
So if someone can sit down with them and say, right, here you go. Here's a box standard, out of the box maintenance schedule from one of the main FM providers. It's going to cost you that every year. There it is. And by the way, you know what? If you do that, there's no guarantee things are not going to break down and fail, because we're working to SFG20 or a similar standard, which uses a time-based maintenance routine regardless of the condition of the equipment, right?
Yep.
Option one. Option two, you say to them, how big is your risk appetite? Should we just run it to fail? You may never have to pay anything, right? We'll just turn it all on, and if it fails, it's going to cost you that.
Yep.
Or you can say to them, there's a predictive model, right? It's 95% accurate based on the amount of data that we've got, and it could save you this with a confidence limit of 5%. Which one do you want? And then it's down to their risk appetite, isn't it? To say, I'll take the out-of-the-box, bog standard thing that gives me no guarantee things won't fail, and I'll probably end up paying more on top of it anyway, but I'll take that one. Right? Option A. Option B was, we'll run it to fail. And actually, as the CFO, I'll be gone in 3 years. So as long as it all lasts 3 years, happy days, right? Because I'll be gone. Or option C, which is, okay, it's a bit new. It's a bit unproven of volume. There is a little bit of risk because of the innovation around it, but look at those cost savings. Right, let's do that one.
And I guess as well, there's no guarantees that maintaining equipment on a PPM schedule in the traditional way, it's gonna work, right? Because we all see this with equipment in buildings that has, failures or breakdowns or maintenance issues or is defective, even though it's been maintained to the schedule that it should have been in a proactive manner. Like generators that don't start up when they need to, or electrical systems that go down. And the thing is, when these systems go down, there is massive fine. If it's under, I've jumped ahead there in my head. Say you could say like a PFI hospital, and then you have a hard FM provider that's contracted to maintain that equipment. There'll be a penalty if that equipment goes down. and then they're huge. If it's a hospital, it can be like, I don't know, thousands of pounds an hour for every hour that piece of equipment is out. And we see that all the time. So the current system is fallible, doesn't always work.
Yeah. So the other thing we need to think about as well is, when we were talking about the healthcare sector, you actually think about the people side of this as well. So it's not just about the maintenance program you put in place. Years ago, we used to joke about French cars, right? Never buy a French car, it'll just break. You get
Do we not
you get
still
a piece
joke
of
about that
equipment
now?
that, yeah, yeah. Well, don't say
Say
anything.
years ago.
But no, you get a piece of kit now, and actually, where's the assurance that that pump is the same as those other 99 pumps, right? Also, you look at the engineer. So, there's a thing called repeatability and reproducibility testing in statistical modeling. Um, and actually, you get 10 engineers to perform a maintenance task on the same piece of equipment using the same spare parts with the same tools, and they will all do it differently
Yes.
because they're not the same person. So actually, you look at those three things we just spoke about in terms of the maintenance approach you could take, you still got to factor in that if you're using different manufacturers or even multiple parts from the same manufacturer or different maintenance engineers, you've got all of that risk inherently built into that process. And what is the contribution to the reliability of the maintenance schedule of those two things? I don't think anyone knows.
Yeah, 100% agreed. When we had our last conversation, you mentioned something about getting the supply chain involved, almost having the sensors built into the equipment prior to the piece of equipment ever being installed. Am I along the right lines there as to what you meant?
Well, I actually think that is happening more and more. So I can't say for the built environment, but if you take a look at, I think it's John Deere. Um, they now sell their equipment with sensors built in, so that when the equipment is harvesting, anything which is not harvested, so rather than having to sort it out at the back end, it's now pinged out at the front end on the harvest, right? The other thing is, on their maintenance schedules, if the maintenance schedules are not adhered to, the equipment will notify John Deere and they will immediately invalidate the warranty. So I think that is on its way. I think the built environment is a bit like the car manufacturing sector in the UK in the 1960s. I think when it does catch up with technology in other sectors, that will become the norm. So I can see the BIFM standards, the Kobe standards, the Fire IE standards, all having these things kind of built into them in the future. I think right now it's a bit of a wild west because, as we've spoken about, multiple technologies with multiple transmission protocols, multiple bits of software with no standardization. It makes it difficult to standardize and pick a way forward, I think.
Yeah, 100% agreed. Graham, I've got to ask you a question. We get a load of tech people on this podcast, right? A lot of them are in startup territory as a software provider or a safety tech solution. You've taken a software company through to listing. How was that process?
To be fair, it wasn't just me. There was a whole team around us, and we had a very experienced board and a number of investors. And I would say, for the guys who actually went across to do it, it was very, very enjoyable. I think, if you are going to do that, I would say go and find some people who've done it before and get them to hold your hand. Is what
Brilliant.
I would say. I think the days of the unicorn are gone. The tech bubble's gone pretty much, hasn't it? That's all past. But yeah, if you do think you have something which is amazing, you can't sell a secret. Go and speak to people, show it to them, find people who understand it, are interested in it, are interested in you as a person and your team, and someone who's done it before, and get them to walk you through that process.
Did you say ASX? Is that the AIM market?
That's the Australian stock exchange.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I should have named that. I'll delete this
No,
out
no,
now and make myself look
why should you
cleverer
have
when the
known that?
podcast comes out.
Yeah, but yeah, I think I've seen some really really good stuff on the market. In fact, I'm going over to Germany in 2 months to take a look at some tech, some emerging tech. But yeah, it's about does it work? Is there Because the thing about tech, right? People invent tech and they go, look, this is amazing. You go, great, what does it do? Does all of this, great. Who needs it? Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. But what outcome does it deliver? I'm not exactly sure. Well, what's the business case for it? Oh, I don't. I'm not. I don't know if there is one, right? So you know, you should always design back, right? So there's a problem there. Let's design some tech to fix a problem, right? So,
Yep.
and then the business case is naturally there, isn't it? But a lot of people, very clever people, invent tech, and then yeah, then they got this tech and they're trying to find a problem that it will fix,
Yep.
rather than knowing what the problem is and designing backwards for the tech to fix it. So
Amazing. Graham, honestly, it's been a real pleasure to have you on the podcast. So
no, thanks for
just
having me, Peter. Appreciate it.
just before you go, if anyone listening to this, if any of what you said has resonated with them, or if they're looking at falls and cows, where's the best place for them to reach out to you to get in touch with you?
If they go to our website, which is Altus, ALTUS, it's altushealthcare.co.uk. You can email us at sales at or graham at altushealthcare.co.uk. You give the office a call, 0333 305 0866. Yeah, you can reach us there. Or you can find me on LinkedIn, Graham Salters. You can find me on LinkedIn, drop me a message on LinkedIn. And if we can help in any way keep your residents safer, happier, and alive for longer, then yeah, let me know.
And I'll put all those contact details in the show notes as well. Thank you very
Brilliant.
much.
No, thanks, Peter.